want to provide all the recordings on the webpage of UCASA, of course, so that's important. So looking at that, I would like to do a bit of contracting here. So look out for transferences that might appear throughout the session, and let's bring it up, guys, and let's speak about it when we experience something here during the session. Also, please look after yourself, whatever you want to share, and you feel comfortable with sharing. Also, with this being recorded, so yeah, be protective for yourself and only go as far as feels comfortable. And confidentiality, please only speak about yourself outside of this room, about your experiences, not about what other people said or experienced. Is that, can we agree on that? Yeah, I see nodding. Okay. So we thought about starting off with asking you guys who hasn't been on one of those CCTA workshops and would like us to go briefly through the principles of co-creative TA. Is there someone? Okay, yeah, Grace. Oh, lovely. Yeah. So we can go through the principles of co-creative TA. We will take turns in that. And is it okay, you guys, if I start off with the, so it's three principles that have been formulated by Keith Tudor and Graeme Summers, the originators or the authors of Co-Creative TA, who won the Rick Bell Memorial Award for it. And the first one principle has been added by our dear friend Paul Robinson. So the first principle that Keith and Graeme talk about is the principle of we-ness. And we-ness means we're in this together. So also in the therapy room, it's not the principle of we-ness speaks to the relational quality of co-creative TA, where there's not the therapist separate from the client or the patient, but there is a space that we create, and something additional will emerge. We will speak more about that later. Something additional will emerge that wouldn't be in the room without those two people. So we're in this together. We can co-creative TA, we create what happens in the room together. That's how I would define we-ness.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. So I'll pick up. The second principle is a commitment to present-centered relating, which means sort of James hinted at something, getting interested in what I'm up to, and being interested in what you're up to, and inviting us both in the moment to get interested in that. This is where we would be using the co-creative idea of the integrating adult. So we're using all our resources to remain in the present and get interested. And Graeme Summers talks about a commitment to being non-defensive about our defenses. So we would start to be interested and create a culture between ourselves where we are open to that. So I love that one, present-centered relating.
And the third principle, again, as Nicole said, relating to what Keith and Graeme developed in their article in 2000, is shared responsibility, which is really important because it gives us the ability to not have the sole responsibility for working through what's going on for us. And it also means that the responsibility for what goes on today with us doesn't just devolve on Nicole, Bev and I. Effectively, we are all responsible for our learning. And it's really important for us to be, actively engaged in this, in a non-defensive way, and being willing to explore when we feel that we are feeling defensive for some reason or another, and that's absolutely okay.
Mm.
So shared responsibility is, is really crucial to this.
Mm.
And it's part of that, as I said, acknowledging both sides of the relationship, that there's not one person that's one up. Now, of course, power dynamics do exist and we can't get rid of them, but there's something about just acknowledging that in principle, we are both here as, as equals, and I'm okay and you're okay is the foundation of this, going back to we-ness as the principle.
Yeah, and it's a lovely bridge, James, to the fourth principle that Paul added, and that is mutual positive regard. And we did a workshop at the beginning of this program. Paul and I did a workshop on mutual positive regard and talked about the difference to okayness. So what's the difference between mutual unconditional positive regard, mutual unconditional positive regard to okayness? And what we came up with was, together with the group, was that the unconditional positive regard is more an intention. So I meet you with the intention of unconditional positive regard. Not so much I make you okay, but my intention is to meet you in a place, as Rumi, Asian philosopher, ancient philosopher would say, I meet you in a field beyond right doing and wrongdoing. So there is this realm of, I don't judge you. I meet you with positive, unconditional positive regard, no matter what.
And could I add to that, Nicole?
Of course, Biv.
When you say that unconditional positive regard, and we talk about this, and it's an okay, we talk about that. It sounds, or could sound, a bit kind of cheesy, like, oh, it's lovely, it's kind of nirvana. And I think in co-creative TA, we really get into how difficult I'm okay, you're okay is. And mutual positive regard doesn't mean that I keep you in a sugary pink bubble. I mean, when we kind of come together for a week, we really get into it, and we go, we get really pissed off with each other. And it's about that commitment to stay. And to really go, well, you're really pissing me off right now, but what am I bringing to that, and what's happening here? And it is not easy. And I feel it felt important for me to say that. Yeah,
it just happened last week, so we can get into places like that. And the intent, and that's why the word intention is so important for me there. My intention is to, nevertheless, although you piss me off right now, nevertheless, I approach you with unconditional positive regard, although I really hate your behavior right now. And I own that I have a part in that too, talking about transferences. So
it talks about something really important, which is our sense of our own okayness.
Yeah.
It is okay for me to feel angry, upset, pissed off. That what goes on inside me is actually fine. It's okay. What I do is it can become questionable, but actually to feel what I feel is okay in all of its difficulties that can emerge.
So we could, as you might sense, we could talk a whole week around the principles of co-creative TA. What this session is meant to focus on is on transferences. Nevertheless, I would like to know if of those for whom these principles may be not very well known or new, or also for those who have heard them several times, are there any resonances to that? Any questions to the principles that we can care for now to then be free to focus on transference? Yes, Jenny, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I had a question, if that's okay. I've been reading a little bit about this, and I'm not overly familiar with it at all. I understand the principles, I understand what you were saying. What I'm finding it difficult to wrap my head around is how it's different to TA, because don't we do all of these things in TA? If that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does make sense,
Yeah.
Jenny, and I really love your question because it's a very important one. And I would like to give part of an answer, and then James and Bev and maybe others might want to link to that. What Graeme Summers and Keith Tudor did when they started to think about co-creative TA is they interpreted Eric Berne's writing. So they took the models and his writing and looked at it and said, well, we could make a different meaning of that, slightly different meaning of that, like as classical TA did, or as authors did until now. And we could frame it a little different than it has been framed or made meaning of before. So it is TA, it's still TA. And I think the emphasis in co-creative TA is on the co-creation. So it's, I think it's a logic developmental step from Eric Berne saying, well, I don't want my patients to lie down and me analyzing them like in psychoanalysis. So he set the patients on a chair, working with them on iHeight, talking to them in a language they could understand. And co-creative TA takes that even one step further, saying there's two human beings meeting, and we co-create the process that evolves. And there is, for example, no such thing anymore, not that strict like a session planning or a treatment planning, for example, because it's not, we don't know what will happen. That might be one difference, Jenny, and that's probably only part of an answer. Is there anything to add, James, Bev, or others to that?
There is for me, but James, you might want to.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first then. For me, there's something really, there is a huge amount that's different in a way. And an example of it, I think, is the focus within a co-creative approach, perhaps particularly in therapy, well, I think in therapy and in the other fields, is the focus of the work is on what the client does, or what a trainee does, or what a supervisee does. The focus is not on what the therapist is doing, or the supervisor, or the trainer. So there's a big change in focus. Yeah. Whereas quite often, I think in some other aspects, you know, take, for example, a fairly classical approach in TA, where you might be reparenting or rechilding. The therapist has a much more active involvement in that. And for example, you wouldn't find within the co-creative approach using rechilding or reparenting as a technique. So the values of the approach are quite different and would result in a different way of working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could go on about that at length, but I think that would give you an inkling. And there are aspects that really are still exactly the same, because Berne talked about I'm okay, you're okay, which is a relational statement. It's a statement in relationship. So there's a sense in which you're right. That there is a sameness in it, that it isn't that different, because that fundamental principle that Berne brought, I'm okay, you're okay, and the world is okay, the bit that Virginia Satir added to it, you know, that is all present and important. So it is just a different way of looking at it.
And I think we can say it's a development.
Yes.
No, it's a development of the existing theory. And so you can think of it in terms of the model. It's a one ego state model of health. and a 3 ego state model of personality structure. So there's that's a difference. And I think in co-creative TA, Jenny, so what I noticed in myself is being more, I think you call it more self-disclosing, where I much sooner would be inviting the client, or maybe differently, inviting the client to get interested in their own transference and to notice it, which in some models and some, ways of working would not be what would be done at all. So inviting their integrating adult, basically.
And maybe, Bev, just to go back to the previous point of that the structural model is very different. And we're not dealing with that tonight.
We're not dealing with it.
But really important, if you're not familiar with co-creative TA, it has a different structural model.
Well, we look at it a bit in the, I can say a bit more when we look at the loops.
True.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because it's the badge, really, of CCTA.
Yeah. Jenny, where are you with your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I can understand what you're saying. It's a development of the existing model, a step beyond, and I like the description of, going from that psychoanalytic approach to burn, and I see what you're saying. It's that next step. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so.
And what I really like about co-creative TA, and that's very Burnian, I think, as well, is the invitation from Keith Tudor and Graeme Summers to be in dialogue and speak about it and be critical about aspects of it and develop it further. So this invitation, it's a bit like the Californian seminars that Eric Byrne held back in the days, where people got together talking theory, drawing models and diagrams and really wrestling about these things. And it's a reviving of that quality of having arguments and discussions about it. And that's what I really love about co-creative TA, that we're invited to think for ourselves and develop it further.
Yeah, and we definitely don't have the right view. And I think Nicole, Bev and I will often have different views of various aspects of it. And I invite you to be critical yourself about what we're talking about and bring in yourself into this and what the impact is on you, just like you did, Jenny, which was great.
Yeah.
This theory is alive. And, for me, theory are simply stories that people told about what they thought happened. We don't have to get rigid with that. We can
I think that's another beautiful bridge, Bev, in what we thought we'd do to make it a bit more, this talking about transference is to make it a bit more experiential. And we would like to, before we go in a bit of theory or more bits of theory, we'd like to invite you to think about your own experiences with transference and countertransference that you might have. And to inspire you, maybe, we would like to just tell 3 very short experiences of ourselves where we found ourselves in that transferential realm, just to give you maybe ideas or inspiration, what examples could be that you will keep to yourself for now, but then in the small groups might want to share and look at it through the different lenses that we will provide. Okay.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
So I have a very short story from a supervision experience where I have had a supervisee who had been on holiday for 2 weeks, had come back and was finding that her clients were DNAing. They were not arriving. They weren't cancelling. They just didn't turn up. And then when she had conversations with them, they were saying, "Oh, I forgot about that," or I was mowing the lawn and I just forgot, or whatever it is. And so she said to me, I said, well, how are you feeling? She was clearly really cheesed off. And she said, well, I'm just really fucking irritated. You know, I said, well, what is the irritation exactly? So she said, well, you know, I'm the therapist. And this is, oh, for God's sake, she said, I know it's the bloody transference, but Christ almighty. And that is the thing. And I, you know, it was so interesting what was getting stirred in her and in me. And I felt protective towards her clients. I then got irritated with her. And when we talked about it and leaned into it, and what she said was, well, I don't want them to make me feel like this about them. And I said to her, well, what sense can we make of it? And what we got to was when she could lean into what was going on for her, rather than saying it's the transference, which is a discount, and actually going, well, it is the transference, and what does that mean, and what's getting reenacted here? This was really different, and there was something about, and I'm going to talk about Jessica Benjamin later, but there's something about being able to tolerate being made into a bad object. And I think this is, and it can be discussed. So the difference there is that I would say to talk to the client about that straight away. And this is what happened, and it was, you know, it did work well. So that's my story.
And I'll follow on from that, because there's a link between my story and yours, Bev. Because one of the things that I'm aware of is when I get into that situation, you know, with a client, I can find that I can struggle sometimes to empathize with my client. And it's because I've been touched in some way, but I'm not willing to acknowledge my own feelings to myself. And when I shut down my own response to myself, I always, I've noticed, shut down my response to my client, and I miss them. And that is, and it is interesting. Quite often, you know, when I go to supervision and I say, I just seem to be missing, you know, this client for whatever reason, usually, well, not usually, it always goes back to, well, what's going on for you? What bit of you are you not connecting with over this? And there'll be something there. And that for me is all about transference, being pulled back into my own past and my struggle to acknowledge my own feelings.
And it's real for you in that moment.
It's more than very real. Yeah. I feel a bit like your supervisor you were talking about. You know, it's very real.
Yeah. And my story is maybe a bit of contrary to what you just said, James, and that is a client of mine who started crying, and it's not a TA person, so it's a random coachee who came with an issue where she's struggling a lot with being treated with mistrust in her management role by employees, and then she there was a slight twist in what she was telling, and she started or tears welled up in her eyes, and she said, and it's the same in my private life, but I won't talk about that. And in that instant I felt like, let me love you, I'm here for you, I will be there for you forever and ever and ever. I was like drawn into this, you need to love this woman. And then later on, when I didn't say to her, I feel like I need to love you, but so I didn't disclose that in that moment, but later in the session we came to a point where she could access her needs, her need of being seen and being accounted for and being loved in the workplace by her employees, and how they didn't by treating her with mistrust, So that was a very strong reaction to her not then voiced need of being loved. This, I need to love this woman. So interesting.
Is it love or save?
Say again, Nikki, please.
To love or to save?
I
Is
don't
it a
know the second
rescue?
word.
Is it? I guess what you're hinting at, is it a rescue, Nikki?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Only
yeah.
because I struggle a bit with that because of my childhood. I go into that instead of loving myself. It's like I will go into that place where I want people to rescue me. So I play that victim. I do it. I go to therapy every week and I see a psychotherapist every week, and we do talk about the transference bit. It's awkward. But we talk through it, and I think at the start, because I've been with him nearly 3 years now, at the start he wasn't up for that. He's the therapist and we don't talk about my stuff, but I learn from when I'm trying to pull him in. He used to just be, it's hard to describe, but I would make him talk about it, and then the more we spoke about it, he would say, I felt you're trying to pull me in doing this, and we talk about it because I don't know I'm doing it. And it's taught me so much about me. I don't need to, because you don't know you're doing it. It's
exactly.
yeah. So that when you said that, it resonated with me of, do I want love or do I want to be rescued, not saved, rescued?
Yeah. And thank you so much, Nikki, for this sharing, because when you said, is it love or rescue, I noticed, or I learned something here where I was responding to her need to be loved, and at the same time my past I, as we say in co-creative TA, was triggered by, if I'm only seen and successful and a good counselor if I'm rescuing. So I need to be there fully for her, and she needs to be happy and da-di-da. So to spring into that and
but then we never get out of that pattern. It's
exactly.
And it's hard. It's hard though.
It is.
If I've had quite a lot of therapists over my years, and some of them where I've went to, and I felt that this is way back on my start of my journey, where I will go into a meeting, and if a counsellor says one thing that I don't like, or I can feel it, I feel it straight away. That's it. I'll be like, can I have a new counsellor? And it's took me, and it's all like, I remember coming into a meeting once to meet the lady the first time, and the first thing she said to me was, "You're late." And I went straight into that place of, bearing in mind by now I'd had, so I've only done I've done 3 years to do my diploma in TA, but I've not practiced with clients yet. Because I think I've got my own journey to sort at the moment. And she said, "You're late." And I go, mine is defensive. I go into child straight away. And I said to her something like, should you not be, is it really for you to be, I think I went into critical parent actually, because I went into full of, should you really be telling me I'm late? Should it not be welcome and then we discuss it later on? Because I went into full defensive, and I ended up, we had a bit of a debate as soon as I'd met her, because I was in that place. And it didn't really go very well, because I was obviously in child defensive, critical parent, and then she was in, I don't know what she was in, hierarchy. I'm the adult here, but she wasn't really being a steady adult, I suppose.
It's making me think, Nikki, about how in order to work co-creatively, for instance, and both people need to be bought into it for a start. And you gave some great examples, and like that one, or I think the other one where you and your therapist get into a repeating process. That is a great one to work with co-creatively, where you both you both take responsibility for noticing if it's happened.
Yeah.
Because as you can get hooked by your therapist, the therapist can get hooked by you. And this is something quite radical for me, about me being open to the fact that I could get hooked by my client. It's not all one way.
Yeah.
And that we both take responsibility for going, oh, I think that thing's happening, isn't it? And then to get interested.
But it's
Yeah.
brilliant. I just, to have a therapist who's not scared to actually do that and not feel like I have to be the therapist. I'm the professional one.
Yeah.
Because I've learned so much from him, by
Yeah.
him being a little bit vulnerable and by saying, and just discussed it. I didn't like it at this, like I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean I was bring you in, because it's for me to be saved. That's what's in my brain.
Absolutely.
It's my comfort zone, I suppose.
And I don't want to hear from you, and I want you to just be over there and just listening and not.
But then I won't progress and move on. I'll be stuck forever.
I think that's a very important, very important bit, Nikki, that you're stating here next to your beautiful examples is to work with transferences or in the co-transferential realm or space needs quite a solid fundament of trust and safety and protection. So I think it's really important to take that into account when we go into our theory bits now.
I agree.
That's not things that we would recommend or say to do in one of the first sessions, but you have to build that trust and and learn together. And that's a very beautiful example of co-creating this process together and see what's possible when. So James and Bev, do you think it's appropriate to now share our at least 2 bits of theory, or where are the 2 of you?
Well, I think did you say that after we'd given our examples, we would then ask everyone to in smaller groups talk about maybe experiences they've had? I think that was what we said.
We could do pairs to just share about their experiences, maybe for 5 minutes.
Shall I just be clear on what we're asking?
Yes.
So we're asking you to think about a time when you experienced a strong transferential pull or response, and at this point, just simply what you did. How did that work out? What did you do with it?
Okay, and it's groups of 3 or 2, and you have 15 minutes with a minute to come back, and the sessions start now. And David, you can. The idea of ongoing mutual influence is drawn with this infinity sign or lying 8. So the model, why there is a solid circle in the middle, the adult ego state, and the red ones are not solid but like dotted lines, or I say dotted lines, is because we're talking about the integrating adult here. The integrating adult described by Keith Tudor, which says that in the integrating adult ego state, that is a lively, moving thing rather than a fixated one. There is everything that we integrate in the here and now that is present-centered and in the present moment, appropriate behavior, feelings, and everything is in the integrating adult that's ever evolving. And he says in the adult ego state and in the child ego state, there is the and please correct me, Bev and James, if I'm phrasing that wrong. There's the fixated defense mechanisms that we draw from when we go into our transferences and countertransferences. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
So this is the blue loop, is the present-centered relating from integrating adult to integrating adult. And when you do this, we were talking about somatic experience, so you can go and do the 8 and feel the dynamic of the relating is a constant weaving into one another from a present-centered place. When transference or co-transference in co-creative TA happens, then Graeme and Sue draw it like this. Then the red circles, so the fixated defense mechanisms become solid circles, and the integrating adult has this dotted line because it's not really what we draw from in that instant. And you might take your examples or the examples that we talked about and see, okay, where did that transaction come from, or this response, or this stimulus? Maybe from a defense place, and thus we are in a red loop rather than in a blue loop. So this is the here and now relating, and this is the past I and past me relating, the transferential, co-transferential relating. Bev and I did an addition to this, or a development. I think it's it's something different. It's not an addition to this model, but it's a different model, how we see co-creative relating, and that's this one. The colors are misleading, so we used red and blue, but it has nothing to do with blue loops and red loops. It's more, there's a blue person and a red person. We need to change the colors. We just found that out before we started this session.
But blue and red make purple. That's why we did it, I think.
Yeah, so blue and red made purple because we think it's not only this infinity dynamic between the two integrating adult ego states, but there's a third emerging in the co-creative relating, and that we call that the relational space, where things emerge that can only emerge because there are these two people in the room. This would not, the purple would not appear if there were different people there or only one of them in the room. So the purple is something third, something new that we create together and that we can look at. It's I like to think of it as the diamond, that a beautiful diamond that evolves in the middle, that we can look at and see, oh, there's a facet here and there's a facet there, and this is how it breaks the light. So something that triggers curiosity and interest.
And it relates to one of the fundamental underlying bits of theory to do with co-creative TA, doesn't it? It relates to, you know, co-creative TA draws on Kurt Lewin's field theory. That relationship exists within a field, you know, where there is where a joint experience is created.
Yeah. Paul, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was really interested to see those diagrams, because we had a discussion in our last meeting at college where we were kind of discussing the pros and cons, or the differences between the co-creative model and the 3 ego state model. And one thing that we found really difficult to show in the co-creative model was symbiosis. And so looking at those models that you've just shown, I'm guessing there is a way of showing a symbiosis within within the co-creative
Yeah,
Brilliant,
model.
Paul. And you don't have to apologize and say I'm sorry at the beginning, because I sense there is a new Paul Cameron model coming up in co-creative TA. Beautiful.
yeah.
Symbiosis, co-creative symbiosis described by Paul Cameron.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
you're right. I think it will. The red loop model can help with that. Yeah.
And we can think, I guess, if we merge the two models, if the two people have got sufficient of the blue present, they can then process the red.
Yeah. And that's, I think, really interesting. Who's with the shared responsibility? It's not only the therapist's task or responsibility to recognize the red loops, or that a red dynamic is starting, but it's also the client is, and as we said with Nikki's example, you need a lot of trust, or a good fundament of trust for the client, for the patient or the client to come in and say, I think there's red loops happening here at the moment. Can we look at that, please? So, but the invitation is there to share the responsibility to notice red loop dynamics.
May I just clarify something?
Of course, Jim.
I think, okay, the red loop is the here and now when we're actually looking at the defensive behaviour and dealing with that. Is that right? I wasn't quite, I got a bit lost between the blue, I got the blue and then the red.
So the red is this one.
Yeah.
This, and say again what you understood, what that was, what that represents.
I was thinking, well, it's taking into account all the ego states, so it's taking some of the archaic. We're dealing with the archaic defensiveness as part of this.
Exactly. That's why the red ego states, so the parent and the child ego state, are solid lines, whereas the integrating adult is like in a fog with the dotted line. So it's not really in full. There's not a full access to the integrating adult. That's why the defensive patterns or invitations or behaviors.
I'm going to suggest, Nicole, with Jenny's question, that we go to James, because I think the diamond might help with this, James. What do you think?
Yeah, might do actually, because this is effectively co-transferential relating, and it's past I and past you.
Jenny, is that? Can I before we go there clarify with Jenny? Is it clearer already, or?
That is clear. That is clear already to me. Whereas the first model was integrating adult to integrating adult.
Yes.
This is
And we can speak about the defenses, so they are there, but we're not in it.
So the next picture, then the next graphic was when we are then in it, in our defensive mode.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you very much. Thanks.
You're welcome, Jenny. Thank you for the question. Sorry, James. I just
Well, I can come and talk more about this after Bev has spoken.
It might be good to jump on with that, James, because I think it does further clarify that model, and I can go at the end.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering how many people are familiar with the co-creative diamond? No, I've got lots of head shaking. Yeah, Jenny is.
I would like to throw in: is there a need for a break now? Because we're already here for 1.5 hours, and that's normally a time where it's...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Shall we have a 10-minute bio tea biscuit break and then come back?
Yeah, I like that. Checking in on the bio. Yeah, it's good.
Everybody all right with that?
Yeah, let's do that.
See you in 10.
Come back refreshed.
Dance, wiggle.
That's an order.
I love your elephants, Bina.
Oh, I didn't see them.
Yeah,
She's got
we're behind her.
beautiful elephants on
Yeah.
the picture behind her.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now you can see the beautiful elephants behind Bina.
Oh yeah, lovely. They are nice.
Can't hear you, Bina. You're muted.
Yeah, I love elephants. The room that I'm sitting in is got full of images and stuff of elephants.
I love elephants too.
Yeah.
Very important.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I have my little Ganesh for
Oh.
group process. the god of group process.
Lovely. Yeah.
Ah, there is a chat from you, Sandra. You asked me to say again what I said about intuition. So Bern invited us.
Is Sandra
I
here
think.
or has she come back yet?
Pardon?
Oh yeah, here she comes. Yeah. I didn't know she was still on a break.
So Eric Berne wrote a book on intuition. I don't know if I find it quickly now. So there is a book of Eric Berne on intuition, and in that he invites us to professionalize our intuition. That's what I meant to say. So to really be aware of what we intuitively pick up and then reflect on that. And yeah, like Hassan said, he did something that he now, when he looks at it, would declare as being an invitation into a co-creative space. Okay, over to you, James.
Yeah, it's James, isn't it? You're muted, James.
Q. Oh, so I'm going to share my screen and going to talk about Co-Creative Diamond. So off we go. Right. You don't want that one just yet. We'll have this one. This is the Co-Creative Diamond. And it's about co-creative therapeutic relating. And it's a very practical diagram. This is what I really love about it, is it is the practicality of working co-creatively. And the fundamental beginning of it is that we work in adult, working from our integrating adult, present I, present you, adult to adult transactional relating. And Keith calls this empathic transactional relating. And it's again, going back to when we talked about principles, it's a non-defensive place. It's a place where we can be present in a very I'm okay, you're okay way. And I'm okay, you're okay, and everybody else that's with us is okay. And it really is the core of thinking about our work. And it then also acknowledges that one or other, if thinking of two people in a room for the moment, one or other of us can slip into the past. Now, I'm going to relate this in a minute to transactions, to root it back into some quite classical TA. But one or other of us can slip into the past. And one of the great things that this emphasizes is that either person in this dynamic can go there. It isn't about the all-knowing therapist never goes into the past. It's about acknowledging that any two human beings sitting in front of each other can play these dynamics out. Okay? And it's what's called partial transferential, because one of the parties is relating transferentially. And then, of course, the result of that is, if one person goes, the other person can go too. And so you can end up with both parties being in the past. And this is red loops here, going back to what Nicole talked about. And this is blue loops up here. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is just show you another way of diagramming this, which is keeping to the same diagram. In present I, present you, we have adult to adult relating from integrating adult. And the past I, present you, one of us is going parent-child and the other person is going adult-adult. And obviously, if you go to the other side, it's the mirror image of this. Okay. And if we co-transferentially relate, our transactions become complementary. Yeah. And one of the important things to notice, this diagram's in a way a tiny bit wrong, because go back to the main diagram, notice the arrows, they're bidirectional. You can slip in any of these directions. Oh, whoops, that didn't mean to happen. Let's go back to actual size. Yeah.
I think the little examples are quite nice, James, in this one.
Yeah, apart from the fact
You're zooming.
Yeah, accidentally zooming. Yeah, I realise I do that when I know what to do or say. And this is, again, going back to Bev talked earlier about, with her clients working co-creatively, you might share and disclose your own process with your client. Yeah, this is what I get up to. Yeah. And then this sort of scenario, and in a way, sadly, it's showing that the client has moved into the past, but it could equally be the therapist. I hate it when you just reflect back what I've said. I feel you've withdrawn into a therapy role. Now, of course, at this point, you know, the therapist can cross that transaction, which might be a bit reminiscent of what Nikki was talking about, which would be quite painful. But the therapist might choose to become complimentary about that and acknowledge what's going on for the client there, and that actually the client is finding this painful. Yeah. Let me just get rid of that.
Paul asked Keith and Graham why they didn't in the middle, why they didn't paint the rectangle as big as the other one on the right hand side. And the answer was because the page wasn't large enough. Yeah. So imagine that this other box needs to be the same.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same. And of course, it's and very much for Keith and Graham. You know, this here is the real relationship. It isn't a working alliance. For them, the working alliance expresses something about the content and process of relationship. But for them, this is the real relationship. And that relationship encompasses the capacity to contract around being able to explore this material here, both the co-transferential material and the partial transferential, both either from the therapist or the client. Yeah. What else can we say about that? No, I think that's enough on that, actually.
Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions about that?
Yes, I do.
Fire away, Jenny.
Just that with the second diagram, presumably you were referring to the fact that the arrows could have been as they were in the first diagram, because it's possible to move round.
This is from the article, but the arrows should be identical, double-headed.
Right. Yeah, that's fine. So it is a process as usual, and it can be going from one to the other. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
But it is I think one of the things to get from this is the importance of the adult-adult relating. And it's not saying that co-transferential relating is something lesser, but it's acknowledging that transference is a phenomenological experience, and that we can experience this and we can experience this. And it's here that we make sense of it. It's
Oh,
here
lovely
that we
way to say
process
it,
it.
James. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
And for me, the simplicity of it is I don't need to get lost, for example, in Patricia Clarkson's 12 different types of transference. I'm afraid that just busts my head. And I can't work with it with the client. But actually, this for me is really useful. And it is about being able to develop a sense of, am I in the present? Am I in the here and now or not? And becoming sensitive to that.
And what I like about it, James, is that it simplifies the
Yes.
model, but it doesn't say it's easy to
Yeah.
handle
No, it's
that.
not, because the reality of this is transference is, our early, as somebody has already said, I think it was Nikki was talking about it. This really, when what we're talking about is stuff that's happened developmentally very early, this is not easy material to process. It really is not. A little theoretical point here is the arrows are drawn here, which all look like social level arrows. And of course, one sort of emphasis Keith Tudor has is that this is about a conscious process. Keith says he does not imply any ulteriors here, in this place here. He does not believe that there are any ulteriors. He focuses on the conscious aspect of it, the social level. And of course, Graeme, and I think I do too, and the two of us did a workshop on the implicit relationship, and that there will be ulteriors taking
I agree.
place. And there will be an implicit relationship which is not explicit, but rooted in integrating adults, because in integrating adults you will have the material that's been brought in to adults from archaic ego state, of archaic parent aspect and archaic child aspect.
It reminds me, James, of a conversation I had with a friend the other day, where he said it was lovely to meet. We went away for a weekend, and he said it was lovely to meet you in this expectation-free time. And that really made me think that I strongly believe there is no such thing as a relationship that is absolutely free from expectations. We will always have some implicit wishes, needs, dreams, expectations.
Well, it comes back to, it was Bina who talked about the dream aspect of it. There is a lot of what we are not just conscious beings. There is a huge, and it comes back to the embodied aspect of our experience. And that is all implicit. We are aware of so little of our process. And so I feel, and my experience of my own therapy is that quite often I change without having ever contracted or discussed, that the relationship has resulted in change occurring.
And for me, in that mode, integrating adult to integrating adult, I have the ability to notice the implicit and to talk about it in the moment. And so for me, that's kind of how I think of it, really. That it's, I don't have something that I'm keeping to myself. As we, I will share it as it comes, as it emerges.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because in a way, the way we think about it, and this bit of theory comes from Graeme, is that in adult to adult, it's out of awareness, it's non-conscious. But what Graeme says is this implicit relationship isn't repressed. Whereas within this more psychoanalytic approach, what we would say within the archaic ego states is that it's not non-conscious, it's unconscious. And by that he means it's repressed actively repressed.
Mm.
Whereas when it's integrated, it may not be conscious, but it could become conscious because it's not actively repressed.
Nicely done.
Yes.
So is that, can I stop sharing? Is that
Yeah,
enough?
go for it.
Yeah, I think.
I think
Yeah,
you can,
everybody
because
okay with that?
it does bridge nicely into this final piece that I'll do.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, as a person that's interested in co-creative TA, I'm always looking as well at other pieces of theory, other authors that seem to be talking about something like this, or that where it further illuminates and expands and develops. And the author that I love is Jessica Benjamin, and she has written this book, Beyond Doer and Done To. It's absolutely, oh my God, it's mind-blowing. And she's not had anything to do with Keith and Graeme. And she's talking about intersubjectivity and the third. We've had discussions about it. I mean, there isn't time for it now, but it's very exciting. And I want to share with you a paragraph from her writing that links to what we're saying today.
I love your excitement with Benjamin.
And what she's talking about is paradox. And what she says is, a key paradox is, whilst the client is enacting past injuries. So basically, if I'm enacting past injuries with James, who's my therapist, we might be in a game, and we might be, James and I might be, you know, something's happening there. Mm-hmm. So I might be in that case enacting a past injury where I feel persecuted, for instance. But at the same time as enacting past injuries, the client must also hold some sense of the therapist as the safe person who will repair them. So although I am making, you know, if James is my therapist, I'm making James into a bad object somehow, or a transferential remembering, I'm also holding him somewhere else as someone that will repair me and will be a safe person to be with. And what Benjamin says is that these two visions can easily become incompatible realities. As long as the two of us can negotiate the tension between the pull to repeat past injury and the push to repair, so it's a thread between us in a way, and in that, therefore living in the paradox, basically, then things are good. And good as in it's all lovely, or it's all going well here. And that might be an illusion. But when the two sides split apart, the thirdness, like the purple bit in Nicole's and my thing that we made, the thirdness devolves into complementary two-ness. So we go to the bottom diamond element. And the therapist finds herself unable to respond to both demands of being both healer and harmer. So while I'm holding on to and bearing being the bad object, I might be having a response to that. I'm thinking about James, for instance, what he shared. I'm thinking about quite a few people here, like what was going on for the therapist that said you're late. I mean, good grief, I don't know. So that the analyst is unable to respond to these demands of being healer and harmer. And so when enactments bring dissociated parts of self into play at this stress point, in this tension, this thread between us, it can, that very place can present an opportunity for the client's articulation of their dilemma as they work this out. However, this is where the co-creativity comes in. If I go off and I'm sort of doing an interpretation in my head and I'm making notes and I'm sort of thinking what's happening, I'm not sharing it with the client, And I try to maybe resolve the paradox by moving into telling myself, this is just transference. And I can go away and make sense of that in my supervision, for instance. The denial of the danger. So that basically there's a denial of danger. So when I start to feel this tension and that I've been made bad and I can't stand it or whatever, there's that, and I then go away from it by saying, oh, it's a transference. Oh, okay, I'll work it out later. There's a denial of the danger, and that might really intensify and reinforce the client's anxiety and struggle. But if I allow myself to become part of complementary opposition, so I'm willing to stay as the bad object, and I might notice that somehow. So I don't need to do this thing where I know best and I know when to time this and I know when to come in with something. I share what's going on, and then the hidden self of maybe both of us is allowed to emerge, and this collaboration then is about the unpacking of the enactment becomes collaborative. And I think this is a way that I like to work, and I think it's in some ways different to other ways of working. So that's the third and final piece of theory that we're going to share with you.
That is me and my therapist, DT.
Really?
And do you know what? When I go see him next week, I'm going to bloody tell him how well he's doing as a therapist.
Yeah.
Oh,
As I just think he's a lovely bloke anyway. He's just, but the fact that he could have just stayed professional, he's just gone into open. I suppose it is being a bit more vulnerable as a therapist when instead of thinking I've got to be strong, I've got to be but you're not a fixer, you're in it with us.
Nikki, notice what you said there, which was really interesting. You said he could have stayed professional. For me, what he's doing is staying professional.
absolutely.
Maybe I mean,
But you've really put a finger on something, because I've been told sometimes that what I do is unprofessional, and I think it's the opposite of unprofessional. But it's different to some other thinking.
Yeah, because it is being able to stay in that non-defensive place, the corollary of which is being vulnerable and allowing yourself to feel what's going on for yourself and in the relationship.
And I mean, we know today from research that the main factor of effectivity, is that an English word? So effectiveness is better, I think. In therapy or counseling or client work is the relationship. That's the main factor, success factor in therapy and counseling. So how can we be in a relationship when we're not showing up as people in a professional way?
Yeah, and we're guided always, aren't we, by our ethics, our ethical principles. So that's what holds us. That's where I go when I'm thinking about what to do and how to do it. It's about, you can be held there. That's your bottom line. So should we go, because I'm thinking about time as well, do we go now to invite people to go back into groups? Or I think we had a question about whether you'd want to go into small groups again, or to stay here and share your gatherings and your wonderings. What would you rather really do?
Nice to hear everybody's stuff. I find anyway, just that's what people feel, isn't it?
If you want to if you want to stay together, just put your thumb up on. And so we've got some people that would like to go into groups, and some would like to stay together.
Well, how about 10 minutes in groups, and then we'll come back together and spend the last quarter of an hour. Would that work for you?
Yeah, and we could perhaps do a slightly larger group, so people.
Yeah,
meaty there.
Yeah.
Okay with everyone, we kind of meet both needs there with a bit of smaller group work and then some large.
Well, I think it's really useful to share our learning, because one of the joys of a larger group is we can learn so much from each other.
Okay, so 10
But
is...
I have groups of 4 and two
Right.
groups of 4 and 2 groups of 3.
Great. So we come back at 1:45, Nicole?
And I'll make it 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a minute to come back.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And we'll see you then, guys.
So it's basically sharing what's emerged for you now, I guess.
Yeah. And
You guys. What's emerging?
Let's have a sharing of maybe 10 minutes and then 5 minutes checking out of this session, something like that.
Can I ask a question? Is that
Of course, Bina.
No, Bina, no, you can't.
No, you're not. You can't. Everybody else can.
I've got the elephants behind me.
Okay, go on then.
When I was looking at the diagram, the one that James actually shared, and you as well, Nicole, I was thinking that when we're working with clients, how will you apply that theory? So say, for instance, initially, when we are building relationship with a client, of course, they're going to be in their script, they're going to, take us on to loads of different places. There will be some collusion going on unconsciously as well. And am I to think that the adult to adult integration comes in at a kind of a later stage, or very at the very beginning as well? Because I'm thinking about, how I work with a client, and initially it's very much about relationship, but relationship here happens all the time. But I'm trying to think about the core creative.
Well, I really like your question, Bina, and I think it's really pertinent and sort of one that I welcome being able to answer, I suppose. So this is the way I would answer it, and Nicole and James might say differently. When we take clients as transactional analysts, we do that on the basis that they've got sufficient adult to work with us. For me, if they've got sufficient adult to work on themselves and to reflect, that means they've got reflective capacity. I would be inviting that really straight away. Probably not really in your face way. I would be talking to them about how I call it playing old records when we're in script. That's the way I do it. And I can talk to people about playing old records straight away and get them to start to notice. So I would be doing that really quickly, really soon, probably sooner than we might have been taught, for instance.
Okay.
I was thinking, James, do you want?
No, you carry on.
I was thinking about a conversation we had several times about the difference of counseling and psychotherapy, where we noticed time after time that me as a counselor, my access point into working with script maybe is through looking for resources in people, whereas Bev, you as if I understood you right, your access point would rather be looking at the wounds in people and invite them into playing old records and being there. And I think your answer, I didn't expect you to answer this question like you did, Bev, because I thought you would say speak about the fundament of trust building first. And my answer in my counseling practice would be the same. So you can, from the start, invite people. Also doing, if the, I don't know if you are aware about the Paul Ware's contact doors. So if you have somebody who is very strong in thinking, you can provide them with a model and show them the blue loop and red loop thing and say, well, that's what my background is, or that's how I think, and let's contract on being aware of what's happening between the two of us.
And
Yeah.
I think people only allow their window on the world to open at a kind of speed that they can tolerate.
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's about can the people we're with be non-defensively present?
Yeah.
And what is the issue of what Nicole just said around the safety in the room, is the client feels safe enough to actually engage with this.
Mm.
And I think they will need to be. I think any attempt at forcing that would result in the client running for the hills, and that's not good therapy. That's like demanding them to explain why they're late when they turn up for the first time. That's not therapeutic.
Yeah. So you need to use your ethical principles in everything, and that's no different to when you're using co-creative TA.
And I can imagine that if we had the chance to ask the therapist who said you're late, why she or he did that, there might be a good explanation for that. I just want to
I did ask.
safeguard that.
Mm.
Okay.
It must have been just one of her things then, because she was just very defensive when I questioned why, but then I probably went and did a bit of critical parent and child at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's the shared but not equal responsibility. I would phrase it like that. It would have been their responsibility to notice what's going on.
And you can see there with the tension between being the bad object and being the person, the good object, really. There just wasn't enough there between you to hold that, was there? It just wasn't. Yeah.
I wanted out of there. So I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So coming back to Bina, as you're wondering, nourished, or your question answered?
Yes, I mean, thank you everyone for making it clear. I guess when I was looking at the diagram, I was trying to apply how I work with in that context, and that's the thought that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thought too.
Great.
We really have to ask those questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
Well,
I think
of course,
it's
like,
all,
what am I doing? Like, I'm like this theory, but what am I doing? How am I actually doing it? Am I doing it? We've got to ask those questions.
Yeah. So it's the application of it, It's learning the theory, knowing about it, but then how do I apply it when I'm working with a client?
Yeah. I love the cat tail that just wandered through your picture, Margaret. Really nice, the cat go. Yeah, and I think, Bina, it's important that we as therapists or counselors or people who work with people feel it's not only the client who needs to feel safe, we do too. So we do have to feel comfortable and safe with this amount of self-disclosure that we're inviting you into now with this session. I think it's a bit trial and error, and see what do you feel comfortable enough with, and make your experiences with that.
And it doesn't have to be deep dives. Self-disclosure can be very subtle. It can just be an expression. It can even be, we self-disclose with what we wear, for instance. It doesn't have to be some kind of deep, potentially, wounding, harmful thing. It's
and we're not speaking about sharing your process and script stuff. That's not what we mean.
But I think there is space, actually, with Bina's question, and for us to potentially do something like a fishbowl, where we actually do a session where one of us is the therapist and one of us is a client, and we work co-creatively and we really demonstrate it. That might be.
That would be really good. That
Yeah.
would be brilliant.
Great idea, Bev.
Yeah.
Walk the talk, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could do a session where we do supervision with people. We don't have to role play something, but we can invite into a supervision, CCTA supervision module where we, I don't know, maybe all 6 of us are here, and then we split in groups and say groups of 5.
We'll chew on that. I think that will.
Yeah.
Jenny, did you want to say something?
No, I was telling James that he was muted. He was saying something.
Oh, James.
I went like this.
Nikki.
Thank you, Jenny. I was muted because the dog's barking. There's another aspect of this that relates to this, Bina, is that the concept of cure within co-creative TA is very much about what the client does. And it's about how the client learns to empathize with themselves and so integrate their archaic stuff by observing how we as the therapist make contact with our own material. So this sort of self-disclosure is about our showing to the modeling for the client how we can be in contact with ourselves, which enables them to be able to think, perhaps I can allow myself to touch this stuff that I don't really want to look at.
Yeah, I mean, an intervention that I suppose I often make would be something like, oh, let me just check in with myself, what's happening, and now,
Lovely.
so it would be, they know that I've stopped to think, and I will be careful, of course, what I then say, but it will be true.
Yeah.
So guys, I think we slowly but surely need to
Oh God.
swim towards the end, although it feels like we could go on for another hour or 2. And I would like to invite all of us into reflecting on the past 2.5 hours and maybe some comments on what did you experience, think your hearts, and what are you taking away maybe, or what new questions emerged? Maybe you disagree with things. So what is it? What is your state of being in the present centered or in the present moment? How you leave this session?
You can say it or put it in the chat. It's up to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Aha moments. A lot of aha moments.
Aha moments.
It's just, yeah, I'd like to do any more bits that you come up. I think I love this co-creative stuff, because if I'd have had this from the start 8-10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have took me so long to get through my journey.
Yeah. And Nikki, it takes however long it takes, and it's okay.
But that's why I was saying it bored. I didn't think I meant frustrating, maybe.
Yeah, and you're seemingly well on the way.
Yeah, I found the I was going to say I found the diagrams really helpful, really kind of crystallized a few things for me, and of course they're open to interpretation as well, which is a great thing about them. So yeah, it's really good to get that. Yeah, really kind of crystallize up, felt it has crystallized a few things for me. So yeah, really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Been a good experience.
Looking forward to your model.
Thank you.
Really nice things in the chat.
Yeah. And Alan wants to say something.
I think I'll just carry on from what Paul was saying, what Hassan said in the chat, is that I think the diagrams are fantastic because they're really simple, and they're not complicated, but in your mind you can integrate them, and you can see how it works. So it's good to see diagrams that really, and especially use of colour as well. That just brings it home.
Yeah.
But to go away and maybe go and sort of think about that and how you bring that into your work. So thank you.
Wonderful.
I
Thank you
love the
both.
fact that there were 3 of you facilitating,
No.
co-creating with each
Yeah.
other and us, and there are differences of opinion. I think it's really really affirming to know that theory can and will change, and if it's done in a mutually positive regard way, that's not grammatical, but you get my drift. It's really great to explore the models and disagree and then find new learning. It's great. So thank you all of you very much.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
I was just going to add as well a question, I suppose. Not expecting anyone to answer because of the time available, but how the kind of the differences in between working online and face to face in terms of creating that third space in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, David, is there any answer in what we've done tonight?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
No, it's one for me to take away and ponder.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice question. I've written it down.
I'm taken away really and being energized and inspired by your questions and your wonderings, and just lovely to be in contact, although it's online and not in one room. And I said it in our breakout, but I'm very willing to say it again. I just love the 2 of you, James and Bev, and I'd love to work with you, and looking forward to more next time.
Yeah, me too. And guys, look out for the UCATA conference next April, because we are planning a CCTA thread across the whole 3 days. So that's quite exciting.
The dog thinks
love to work with you all again. I hope you do.
Just want to say thank you to you all for for being here and participating. It's been great.
Spread the love.
Thanks.
Enjoy your evenings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Go well.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.